Psychology tells us something most of us never stop to consider. Loneliness isn't just being alone. It's feeling unseen, unheard, and disconnected, even when people surround you. Imagine sitting in a crowded room, laughter all around, yet feeling like there's a glass wall between you and the world. That ache you feel isn't a flaw, it's a signal, a mirror reflecting the deepest parts of yourself that are craving understanding and connection. What if I told you that the solution doesn't always lie in finding someone else, but in discovering and embracing your own inner world? The same mind that makes loneliness feel unbearable can also guide you to self-compassion, empathy, and authentic relationships. In this video, we'll explore how psychology uncovers the silent power within loneliness, how it can reveal who you really are, and how, by listening to yourself, you can transform isolation into insight, vulnerability into strength, and emptiness into profound human connection. Psychology reveals a truth that most of us ignore. Loneliness is not just a momentary feeling, it is a signal deeply wired into our humanity, an emotional alarm that something vital is missing in our lives. Imagine being surrounded by people, laughter filling the room, yet feeling as if a transparent wall separates you from every connection around you. That is the paradox of loneliness. It is possible to be physically present and socially connected, yet emotionally isolated. Our minds are exquisitely sensitive to the gap between the relationships we desire and those we actually experience. And this gap can shape the way we think, feel, and even act. Loneliness intensifies self-perception, amplifying insecurities, self-doubt, and the fear that we are not understood or valued. It can make ordinary interactions feel meaningless and create a persistent ache that gnaws at our sense of belonging. Yet, it is precisely this ache that carries profound insight. It draws attention to our deepest need for authentic connection. The human mind, in its awareness of isolation, begins to reflect, to evaluate, to seek understanding both within and beyond itself. Loneliness is a mirror showing the distance between the self we inhabit and the relationships we crave, forcing a confrontation with both our vulnerability and our capacity for empathy, awareness, and growth. Psychology uncovers a startling reality. Loneliness is not determined by how many people surround you, but by how connected you truly feel to them. It is possible to be in a crowded room, hear laughter and conversation, and yet feel completely invisible, as if your presence goes unnoticed. The mind evaluates relationships not only by their existence, but by their depth, authenticity, and the sense of understanding they provide. This means that two people sitting side by side can experience the world in dramatically different ways. One feels warmth and belonging, while the other feels an invisible chasm separating them from everyone else. Loneliness is amplified when the mind perceives rejection, misunderstanding, or emotional distance, and even small slights or lack of acknowledgement can trigger a profound sense of isolation. It hijacks thought patterns, making everyday interactions feel hollow, intensifying self-consciousness and feeding an internal narrative of being unsupported or unseen. What is shocking is that this perception can alter behavior, causing withdrawal, social avoidance, and heightened sensitivity to rejection, creating a self-perpetuating cycle. The human mind is wired to seek meaningful connection, and when it is absent or perceived as absent, it reacts as though survival itself is at stake, producing stress, anxiety, and a craving that no quantity of superficial social contact can satisfy. Understanding this cognitive dimension of loneliness reveals why it can feel so inescapable and why genuine empathy and authentic presence are critical for human well-being. Psychology reveals a shocking truth. Loneliness is often less about the reality around us and more about the story our mind tells itself. It is possible to be surrounded by friends, family, or colleagues, yet feel completely isolated because the mind interprets those interactions through a lens of expectation, fear, and perception. This means that loneliness is not simply the absence of company, but the presence of disconnection, misunderstanding, and the sense that no one truly sees or values you. The mind constantly evaluates relationships, measuring closeness, support and authenticity, and when these standards are unmet, even subtly, the sense of isolation intensifies. What is startling is that two people can experience the same social situation in opposite ways. One may feel deeply connected, while the other feels invisible, misunderstood, and profoundly alone. Loneliness shapes cognition, influencing attention, memory, and emotional processing, so that a neutral remark or a delayed response can feel like rejection, reinforcing the perception of isolation. The brain interprets this emotional gap as a threat, triggering stress responses similar to those activated by physical danger. Over time, this perception-driven loneliness can alter behavior, causing withdrawal, social anxiety, and a cycle of self-reinforcing isolation. Understanding that loneliness is as much a product of perception as circumstance highlights why empathy, self-awareness, and authentic human connection are not optional, but essential for breaking free from the silent grip of isolation. Psychology uncovers a startling and often overlooked danger. Chronic loneliness can alter not only how we feel, but how our minds and bodies function, creating effects as damaging as physical illness. When someone experiences prolonged isolation, the brain responds as if under continuous stress, releasing cortisol and other stress hormones that affect sleep, immunity, and even heart health. What is shocking is that the absence of meaningful connection can trigger changes in neural pathways, heightening sensitivity to perceived rejection and amplifying feelings of anxiety and depression. Loneliness hijacks thought patterns, convincing the mind that it is unsafe, unsupported, or unworthy of care, and this mental state can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, causing withdrawal, social avoidance, and increased vulnerability to mental disorders. Cognitive functions such as attention, memory, and decision-making are impaired as the brain focuses on survival and threat detection, even in non-threatening environments. The mind treats emotional isolation almost as if it were physical danger, activating fight or flight responses that create fatigue, irritability, and a sense of emotional numbness. What most fail to realize is that the psychological impact of loneliness extends beyond mood. It shapes behavior, perception, and physical health, intertwining the mind and body in a relentless cycle. This hidden epidemic is not always visible, yet it quietly erodes well-being, making human connection not a luxury but a critical necessity for survival and mental balance. Psychology reveals a profound paradox. Loneliness, while painful, can be a doorway to deep self-awareness and personal growth. What is shocking is that the very emotion that feels like a void or a punishment is actually an urgent signal from the mind, drawing attention to unmet emotional needs and the yearning for authentic connection. When someone experiences loneliness, it magnifies the inner landscape, making thoughts, feelings, and desires impossible to ignore. The mind begins to reflect on its own patterns, its attachments, and its expectations of others. It forces us to confront the truths we often avoid, the fears of rejection, inadequacy, or invisibility, and in doing so, it can illuminate paths for self-discovery. Loneliness, in its raw form, strips away distraction and pretense, exposing the essential question of who we are when no one else is watching or responding. It can sharpen empathy, as the experience of emotional isolation heightens sensitivity to the suffering of others, creating a deeper capacity for compassion. The shocking reality is that humans are wired not only to connect with others, but also to connect with themselves, and loneliness is the mind's blunt instrument to demand this engagement. Those who learn to sit with it, understand it, and respond consciously can transform a seemingly painful state into profound insight, emotional resilience, and a stronger foundation for meaningful relationships. Psychology exposes a startling truth. The cure for loneliness begins not with others, but with ourselves. Yet most people never realize this until it is almost too late. The human mind craves connection, but it is not merely the presence of people that satisfies this craving, it is the quality of connection, both with others and with oneself. What is shocking is that many spend a lifetime seeking external validation, friendship, or intimacy, while neglecting the inner relationship that is the foundation for all meaningful bonds. When we cultivate self-compassion, truly listen to our own thoughts, and understand our emotions without judgment, we create a reservoir of connection that cannot be entirely taken away by circumstance. The mind, when engaged in this way, begins to transform loneliness from a source of despair into a wellspring of insight and resilience. Self-awareness allows us to recognize the triggers of isolation, to respond rather than react, and to form deeper, more authentic relationships. Loneliness becomes not an enemy, but a teacher, revealing where our needs are unmet and where our hearts seek genuine engagement. The shocking reality is that the depth and richness of our social connections are directly linked to the depth and richness of the relationship we cultivate with ourselves. And without this internal foundation, even the closest companions cannot fill the silent void within. In understanding loneliness, we uncover one of the most profound truths of our human experience, that our deepest yearnings are not for mere presence, but for authentic connection, both with others and with ourselves. Loneliness is not a weakness, nor a punishment, but a guide, a signal that calls us to reflection, empathy, and personal growth. By embracing our emotions, cultivating self-compassion, and seeking meaningful relationships, we transform isolation into insight, emptiness into understanding, and vulnerability into strength. I wish each of you the courage to face the quiet moments, to listen to your own mind and heart, and to nurture the connections that truly matter. May you find strength in solitude, empathy in experience, and growth in every challenge. Good luck on your journey of self-discovery and human connection, and thank you for giving your attention, your openness, and your heart to this exploration of the mind.